Okay, so a couple things that my spacey brain is kind of going to. Number one, shout out Jason Beck. We talked about it on this podcast when the Tigers worked out Max Clark. Like he put it out there, like sources said or whatever. Which is just I'm not gonna say it's an odd thing, but it's not a usual thing for the team MLB.com like reporter to do it in that fashion. We talked about who does it benefit. I really couldn't put my thumb to it. Uh, Now you could probably say it benefited the Tigers to just kind of float it out there that they really like this kid. I think that might be a safe assumption, which was one of the theories we posted, but we didn't necessarily like go all in on it. Two, we talked before the draft, Cody, about like this notion you've mentioned on the podcast about how tight-lipped the Tigers, this regime is in regards to like, oh, guys they like or whatever. And I made the point that are we just kind of saying college bat because it
Yeah.
makes sense and it sounds good? Like, is it just kind of an example of groupthink? Obviously, me, throwing myself in there as well. Not to say that we were lazy, but it just checked all the boxes. It made the most sense in the world. It had been, Langford had been slotted there basically the entire mock draft season. And I think it just kind of became like accepted as fact, but it wasn't necessarily based in anything other than speculation. And then the speculation kind of became the fact, I guess. Langford was there. Now I want to give a shout out to ESPN's Kylie McDaniel. He was the only one of that stature. If I missed somebody, I'm sorry, that had Paul Skeens going one overall. Like he had
Yeah.
it the whole time. Nobody, even when it looked like Cruz was gonna demand too much money or whatever from Pittsburgh, he still didn't waver, put Langford there or whatever. He had him there. I want to give a shout out. His work is obviously top notch. So draft is still going
But,
on.
I mean, let's get into it, Kieran. What's your reaction to the pick?
Okay, so my reaction to the pick is the Tigers are not on the timeline that we think they are, which is not to say that one's better than the other. I also think they just became too enamored with the potential because we talked about this. Like, you got to take the best player you can, and you can't it'd be irresponsible to take a college bat just because you think you need a guy who's 3 years older. Like, if this guy projects as a better player, in my opinion, then you take him. And they clearly thought that. Max Clark seems like an interesting personality. I have no issues with that. I could see some blonde wigs in the stands at Comerica Park here in a couple of years. Like, that's possible. Uh we constantly compliment the Tigers marketing team, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities there too. He is as of now, a true center fielder. We've long talked about Riley Green eventually being in a corner. If things go according to plan, this might be your avenue. Uh, he's 6'1", 190, so he's still going to grow into his body, but he's not small now. I watched the ESPN broadcast. I don't know how MLB Network handled it or whatever, but they throw in some graphics. Like, as of now, 18 years old, he turns 19 in December. He's got slightly above average bat speed. So you figure with more coaching and strength and conditioning programs and blah, 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 like that in theory should increase. You're betting on potential here. I'll tell you this. I don't feel like I did a couple of years ago with the Joe pick, where it's like, I get it. You take the high school guy. I know it wasn't high school versus college strictly there, but even though there were some possibilities, but like, I get it. I wouldn't have done it. I have no problems with this Max Clark selection. I think potentially he is right there. And I don't want his selection to kind of be cloaked in some underslot stuff. I'm not saying that doesn't play a factor, but you're not getting a lesser tier caliber prospect, in my opinion. As much as I like Langford, I have no like. I still think you could sell me Max Clark as a better prospect. You could sell me on that, and I don't think you're not like out of bounds or trying to do a first takey type deal. It's like, no, he's actually a better prospect than Langford. It's fine. But Langford's ceiling, just by the very nature of taking a college guy versus a high school guy, is you're not going to be able to work with him like you can Max Clark. And this regime, I always said, was going to tell us a lot with how they a plethora of options. They told us a lot here. They went with a not a non-consensus player slotted to them. No one, I don't think, actually really thought they're going to take Max Clark, and they did over Langford. So to me, this tells me what they value. It also tells me they don't really give a crap about. I almost said a bad word there. Give a crap about like the right left thing, because if you were going to project out the easy lineup for the next couple years, you probably wanted a right-handed outfielder that you could, slot in there in some pretty strong ink. That's obviously not Max Clark. He's a lefty. But the profile makes sense to take him third overall. It's like I put on Twitter. It's like they saw Corbin Carroll and they're like, I want me one of those. And so, like, I get it. I get 100% what they're doing here. I don't know if I would have done it, but I have no qualms with this selection. But you're really banking on your development system, your performance science system, because there's not really any point in taking a high schooler if you're not going to like mold him into the player of his high caliber. Whereas a college guy, like, he's a little bit more of a finished product.
Yeah, I'm struggling with my reaction to this pick because there's so many thoughts. I mean, I have said on this pod that I really like Max Clark. Keith Law has said he could be 1-1 in a different draft. There is an argument that maybe he was. I mean, he could have gone 1-1. The Pirates supposedly were looking at him. I do wonder, did the Tigers really believe, was he the number one guy on their board, or was he, how much did money play into it? That's kind of the unanswerable question. We'll never really know. I have a hard time believing there wasn't some money at stake. I think Max Clark can be a really good player. He is a fly-tool guy. For all these reactions and the hot takes and the outrage, just like, well, you just mentioned Corbin Carroll. He went like 16th overall. He's going to be the best prospect in that draft class, probably. The MLB draft is a hard science. We just don't know everything about these players, and baseball is so hard to predict. Max Clark, there's a ton to like about him. People say he's the closest to a five-tool guy in this draft. The caveat, though, I don't think I would have taken him over Wyatt Langford. The knock on Clark, like, there's some uncertainty. How much power is there? Langford, we kind of know that there's some power in that bat. Langford wasn't just any guy. He was a really, really good prospect. Again, we can sit here and debate because Spencer Torkelson was supposed to be a really, really good prospect, and here we are, still not sure exactly what he is. It goes to show you the uncertainty, but man, it feels like a little bit overthinking. And even if I do think the ultimate point is what you started with, even if the Tigers are right, even if Max Clark ends up being the best prospect in this draft class, the timeline isn't what a lot of us thought it was, and it's probably not what most people want it to be. There was a legitimate case that Dylan Cruz or Wyatt Langford could have been playing in the major leagues in 2025. You could pencil them in. You could have Riley Green. You could have Colt Keith. You could add a couple players via free agency. You could talk yourself into the 2025 Tigers looking kind of nice. And the chances of Max Clark being in the big leagues in 2025 are pretty much zero. Riley Green got to the big leagues about a year or two quicker than people thought he was. Even if Max Clark follows that development trajectory, it's going to be a little bit longer than it would have been with one of the college guys. And you talk about the center field thing, move Riley to a corner. Riley's going to be knocking on free agency, which is strange to think of, but he's going to be knocking on free agency potentially by the time Max Clark is in the major leagues. I don't think it's as controversial as the Job pick. I think the Tigers got a good player here. They potentially got a really good player here. It's not as risky as the Job pick, but the optics, man, the board fell in the Tigers' favor. They had Langford and they didn't take him. And just like Meyer and Job, we're going to be comparing these two guys for probably the rest of their careers.